Warning. This video will contain spoilers for ReZero, Undertale, and Deltarune. So if you haven't watched or played any of these, leave or face the consequences. This is Natsuki Subaru. Some, if not most of you, may know him. Know him as a foolish, naive, and self-centered young man. However, it is my belief that he is single-handedly the most determined protagonist in all of fiction. Now, I'm not saying any of these words lightly. I honestly believe that he is the most determined of all time. An M-dote, if you will. Actually, don't. That sounds kind of stupid. Anyway, to get a sort of grasp for what I'm trying to say here, let's give a definition to the word determination. A simple search in the Merriam-Webster dictionary describes determination as a firm or fixed intention to achieve a desired end. Based on that definition, doesn't that already flare in your mind as one of the key factors of ReZero's plot? However, an idea in a story is not unless its execution is immaculate. We need to lay down another, more powerful definition of determination. What does determination mean in both the context of ReZero and Undertale/Deltarune? Well, that is the power to change fate. Natsuki Subaru is a completely ordinary young man that had been thrown into the pits of hell. That may be an overstatement, but the world of ReZero is a genuine one that spits out naive kids with delusions of grandeur and power. Its violence isn't of the highest degree, but with his unfamiliarity and young age, he is wholly unequipped and unprepared to face its challenges. He has one sole power. He cannot give up. As author Tape Nagatsuki puts it, this is a story about someone who, when pressed on all sides, uses only his inability to give up as his weapon. So it's a story about not giving up. You may be questioning yourself, wouldn't that follow more along the lines of perseverance rather than determination? And I'd say, perseverance and determination are very closely related terms, with perseverance representing moving forward despite difficulties. And while Subaru definitely exemplifies both, it is his determination, his will, that besides from allowing him to determinate himself, allows him to shape the story to his desired outcomes. In Undertale, the most determined person in the underground has the power to save and load. I'm sure you won't have a hard time connecting this with Subaru's character. However, there's one missing part, which is his specific control over his save points. Now, obviously, the rules of each world are vastly different from another. Subaru's return by death itself does not immediately prove his determination. It is his sheer actions as a character, despite lacking any impactful physical strength, that allows him to defy fate set before him and his loved ones. And throughout each and every story arc, Subaru is the main factor. As Subaru puts it himself in Arc 1, history is a compelling force. That the course of the events at the Loot House will happen no matter what, and Subaru is the sole person with the ability to alter the outcome. Subaru's willpower isn't just based on his unique problem-solving skills or general endurance, but his ability to grow and change throughout each arc that allows him to reach his happy endings. As other people have said, ReZero isn't just a fun journey from start to finish where Subaru must come up with plans to get a happy ending, but a deep, complex character study that forces him to look within himself. His willpower, his determination is his growth, that in the face of stagnation or an insurmountable challenge, Subaru changes himself into the person he needs to be for the people he loves. He alters these cruel, inevitable fates through these means. It's not just having strong willpower, it's acting upon it. You could be wholly determined to accomplish a goal, but it is through self-reflection and a strong sense of direction that you'll actually be able to determine that outcome. Personally, Subaru's determination and willpower just hits me so hard in comparison to other stories because he's genuinely just a human. A human that doubts himself, a human that occasionally succumbs to his own flaws, that he later overcomes, and a human that, in the face of uncertainty, fights back with all of his might. The raw extent of his Herculean efforts through his bloodied and bruised body, and the unmatched power of his words when he spills out all of his emotions. I'll say it again and again. He's not just inspiring because of his feats, but because of his humanity, which is the ultimate telling of his determination. Subaru's grand amount of determination begs the question, why? Why is Subaru so determined to change fate? For what reason am I determined to get the outcome I desire by making this video? I could tell you my reason. It's because I care. I care about ReZero. But that asks even more questions, like why? Wouldn't it be fundamentally irrational to be so connected to a work of fiction that I'm willing to dedicate hours of writing, voicing, and editing a video, as opposed to like studying or working? I would say no. Why? Because it's more than just a work of fiction. Imagine if I didn't care about other people. Imagine if I had zero empathy towards those around me. Imagine if I believed connections were meaningless. That the core factors to what made us human meant nothing to me. I honestly can't imagine that. That's just something I can't do. What it all boils down to is that human connection is just such an incredible thing that makes us act or fight. More people need to realize that. It may seem obvious to some, but I want you to consider how much hatred and vitriol is spewed in this world. Because people lack something so damn necessary. That you can find a truthful connection to others for no other reason that we're human. In my mind, Subaru is a representation of the utmost influential empathy a character can hold. From the very core of his personal experiences, and how he connects to nearly every other character in the show. I've talked about this idea in one of my other videos, but it bears repeating. Beatrice's loneliness waiting for someone to whisk her away and save her. Emilia's struggles over her own autonomy and control over her own life. Reinhardt's burden of expectations, and several other cases. His shared experiences with others is what humanizes them, and what strengthens his bonds. And these bonds and connections are the reason he keeps going, why he's determined. Not out of blindness or selfishness, but of love. The animation in the Season 3 ending spells what I want to say perfectly. Return by Death allows Subaru to stay alive. But his friends are what make him want to stand up and face death for as many times as it takes. I'm unsure if anyone has discussed this interpretation of the Undertale soul modes before, but I'd like to bring it up in the context of ReZero. I'm sure most of you know that despite controlling the red soul, whose trait is debated, I'm going to explain why I think it's soul determination later, the soul swaps between different soul traits throughout the game, such as integrity for Papyrus, kindness for Undyne, perseverance for Muffet, and justice for Metaton. This shows that the protagonist requires these traits for different circumstances. Now, I'm going to remind you why we even know these traits in the first place. The reason is ballgame. Yes, ballgame is the sole reason why we know each trait is assigned to each color. However, determination itself is never explicitly mentioned, but the color of the player's soul shares the color of the flag when you win within 6 seconds in ballgame. Bravery, justice, integrity, kindness, perseverance, patience. These were all used to win at ballgame. Determination is the culmination of all of these traits. All of these traits are how you determine the outcome. This is why red at least has to be one of the colors connected to determination. If you complete the ballgame again, it says, "Try as you might, you continue to be yourself," which implies that the red soul indicates to the player as well. As a side note, determination when mentioned in the True Lab is highlighted as yellow. However, this is the exact same yellow used by the yellow soul, which is justice, showing that it would make more sense to interpret this coloring as a highlight, rather than it being the color of determination, especially when this highlight is used in other cases. Also, although it avoids using the term determination directly, Deltarune's save icon is white rather than yellow in Undertale, which white would also represent a combination of all the colors as well. Lastly, during Asriel's fight, rather than being yellow or gold, the save button flashes between all the different colors, and, in my opinion, it doesn't really fit for determination to be gold anyway. However, those are just my thoughts on that. Anyway, To get back to what I was saying before, how you determine the outcome is your use of each of these traits. This is to say, where would Subaru be without his patience, taking the time to save, rather than moving forward and leaving others behind? Where would Subaru be without his bravery, having the courage to stand up against impossible foes? Where would Subaru be without his integrity, uncompromising in his belief to save others? Where would Subaru be without his perseverance, unrelenting despite his many deaths? Where would Subaru be without his kindness, endlessly forgiving and compassionate towards others? Where would Subaru be without his justice, his will to do what is right? Subaru without these traits would not be Subaru. They would be a Subaru with a fundamental difference to his character to the core. It would be an insult to call these characters Subaru. This is my stance on the if routes in ReZero. I do not believe that these characters are Subaru, as they lack what makes him so special. Yes, they determine separate outcomes of their own stories. However, the ones that they determine are filled with anxiety, dread, and meaningless suffering with no happy ending. The magnitude of each of these traits determines the outcome, and using the power of all of them grants you the best one. The Ayamatsu if route can be viewed as ReZero's quote-unquote no mercy route, as the story takes a dark turn from the very beginning. This Subaru lacked the humility to ask for help, and upon countless resets he distanced himself. And the more he distanced himself, the more ruthless he became, and the more willing he became to kill. He lacked the fundamental sincere regard for others' lives that the true Subaru holds, and views people as obstacles to overcome. This Subaru could be called nothing other than evil, as he was determined, not through any positive traits, but through selfishness and pride. The end of the Ayamatsu story follows Subaru fighting an impossibly strong enemy over and over. The standout difference between Sans and Reinhard is that Reinhard quite literally cannot be defeated, at least through conventional means. I don't think that this parallel was solely developed due to both stories having a time loop system, but it is through both stories looking at human nature and the opposite side of determination. Another if route that isn't quite the same as Ayamatsu, but shares a similar parallel to the No Mercy route is Aganau. The scenario for this one is that, rather than resetting at the end of episode 15, this Subaru lives on for another 20 years constantly chasing revenge. And while along this path, Subaru manipulated, took advantage of, and used others to finally get the outcome he desired, of avenging Rem's death by the hands of Betelgeuse. I wouldn't consider this version of Subaru evil, but he has several moral failings. However, at the end of the story, Subaru dies and comes back. Not in the amount of time that you would expect by Return by Death, but all the way back to the first checkpoint in Arc 3. This is what I would like to look at as an aborted genocide run. Natsuki Subaru remembers everything he did. Every single wrongdoing that he had done to achieve some sort of worthless satisfaction. Despite losing all that time to a reset, he is given a chance to be a better person, before it was too late. Taking a look at the past 3 sections of this video, you seem to wonder, Natsuki Subaru relates a lot to the you in Undertale, in more ways as was mentioned before. Not Frisk, but the player. Undertale criticizes a game-like approach to it, which is to say how you interact with the characters, and what something like saving and loading would represent, including a parallel character, Flowey/Azrael, to bring perspective to your actions, while ReZero literally criticizes Subaru's approach to the new world, forcing him to contend with his expectations and perspectives of other characters, while also including several parallel characters that force him to reflect with his own actions, both in the context of an isekai and down to his core character traits, such as Emilia with her selfless empathy, Rem with her obsessive love, and Aldebaran being a fellow victim of being transported, while also being the opposite of what Subaru would have expected from that status. Reinhard being what Subaru believed he'd be, and Roswell forcing him to understand his maluse of Return by Death, and many, many other examples. I'm going to take a little break to request that you subscribe to our channel. It would really help us out, and if you're enjoying this video, then there's tons of other like this, and there'll be more in the future. Anyway, back to the video. I'm going to take this segment to talk about Deltarune. Trust me, it'll be important. Deltarune's plot, as of the 4 chapters that have been released up until this point, revolves around the legend of the Deltarune, enforcing that what lies ahead of the protagonist has already been written in absolute. that your choices do nothing to alter the course of the story. However, there is a prominent character that spits in the face of this, that being Susie. Susie's role in the prophecy is very interesting to say the least. That is to say, she does not follow the bounds of the prophecy. For smaller notes, her refusal to follow the player's command, while on more defining pieces of evidence that, according to Gerson, Susie holds a white pen known as Hope, being the one thing that can overwrite the dark, which culminates into Susie shattering the outcome of the prophecy with her fist, using her willpower to deny a so-called inevitable fate. For this, I'm quite interested into how the final prophecy will actually play out. Will we get to see this outcome, and then have it be reverted? I'm not really sure. But Deltarune doesn't really seem to play on the meta-narrative of saving and loading, at least as of yet. However, if there is anyone who knows that hell, the pain of having to fight it back against something that's engraved in history, it's Natsuki Subaru. Facing off against the impossible and being crushed over and over again, with nigh chances of succeeding. A soul-flawed man, trapped between Betelgeuse in Arc 3. Roswell's impossible proposition, the very counter to his power in Arc 4. And the man whose mere presence guarantees victory and shatters the hopes of any subjects of his little kingdom, Regulus Corneus in Arc 5. ReZero is a dark series to say the least. However, it doesn't stop it from being endlessly hopeful. But Subaru Natsuki refused. With what power he had left, at each turn, he kept holding on. ReZero is not a story where the protagonist is an all-powerful hero that could do anything. But it is a story that, despite everything, despite him being a flawed young man, that due to his determination, his hope, the naivety, that he is able to refuse despair. He learns the lessons of realism and the pitfalls of his own foolishness that allow him to grow, change, and rewrite the story over again. Do you know how it all ends? No. How do you want it to end? This hope, this naive hope, this gives him the power to save. This is what Natsuki Subaru uses his determination to do, to save. Even though myriad timelines in which he is killed, maimed, or betrayed by people, he chooses to save them. Sound familiar? The true pacifist route would be impossible without your connections. This is where his compassion is pulled in again. That despite these lost timelines of suffering, he decides to save people because he understands their humanity and the connections that others have to them. He chooses forgiveness. He chooses a mercy. If it is to save those he cares about, he'll do it. Over and over again. His hope allows him to stay determined. His belief that, despite everything, he could change the future. This idea is what culminates in Arc 4's conclusion, where Natsuki Subaru is able to save everyone. However, I want to focus on Beatrice. Beatrice's experiences are a reflection of Subaru's own, much like other characters in the series. But it is in this case that Subaru reconciles with his own past, their feelings of loneliness and lack of self-control of their own lives, both waiting for someone to take them away and save them. For Subaru, this happened in a sense, believing that him being transported to Lagunica would be a chance for him to start again. Of course, it didn't actually solve his problems in any way. He was the same naive, self-centered kid as before. But through the help of others, Natsuki Subaru had to save himself. He had to fix the person who had become so broken, with the help of those around him. No one else could actually do it but himself. And reflecting upon his past and current struggles is what allowed him to help Beatrice save herself. This is why Subaru never claimed to be that person. That's because it wouldn't actually change anything. She would still be living by Echidna, her mother's promise, the one that had kept her trapped for so long. This is why Choose Me is so important, granting Beatrice the autonomy that had been stolen from her. How this entire episode plays out reminds me of someone else. Someone that also pushed away the idea of being saved, so they did not have to feel the same pain of losing someone again. That one determined individual that had to press forward again and again, pushing past the flames to save someone, who on the outside denied the desires of wanting to be saved. and that's someone else who is afraid to say goodbye someday, one who is shrouded in loneliness, only to have that trepidation blasted away with the conviction and courage of the determined one. Natsuki Subaru and Frisk and Beatrice and Azriel's dynamic share parallels in a lot of different ways, especially in the spirit of their character arc's most powerful scenes, that show the culmination of the protagonist's journey up until that point, using everything they've learned and been through. To finish up this section, we need to talk about Longshot. Longshot is the fourth and best opening of ReZero, for both how it sounds and how beautifully it echoes the themes of the second half of Arc 4 that I've discussed so far. This song is all about fate. The song even starts with, "This is the fate that brought us here. Watch my long shot." The phrase long shot is a sign of Subaru's determination. As in Arc 4, Subaru is presented with an impossible crossroad by Roswaal, in which he is forced to either save the people of the sanctuary or the mansion. The long shot is Subaru's denial of the fate set before him by the Tome of Wisdom. Natsuki Subaru chooses to save everyone and himself, further rejecting that idea that he must use Return by Death to provide value to his loved ones. Another thing that I love about this song is that it just feels so genuinely hopeful, while also being full of conviction to save, just in the way that it's sung by Mayu Mayashima, who carries the same powerful delivery in Straight Bet as well. The main chorus of the song is all about hope and determination, using the power to save, undoing a cursed fate, and breaking the structure of what's meant to happen. While with this line, the song denies the identity laid out before Subaru by his upbringing, while also refusing to follow the path of his life that Roswaal wanted for him. In the end, we always circle back to the power of human connection, that no matter how many times it takes, Subaru would do anything to save his loved ones. What I find especially interesting is that many people claim that they're willing to die or kill for their loved ones. But are they willing to grow past their flaws and live as well? Genuineness is about action. Natsuki Subaru is my favorite character of all time, if you couldn't tell already by the many videos I've made about him over the course of this channel's history. I wanted to get to the very core of why I enjoy him so much. Obviously, there's a lot more to cover with him, but the idea of determination is just so essential to his character. To be perfectly honest, one of the inspirations behind this video is one of those trait videos where it says characters filled with blank, with the finale theme playing in the background. Subaru was put in perseverance, which I just don't understand. To me, it was pretty plain to see why Subaru would be determination and not perseverance. I mean, the parallels between Undertale and ReZero are very apparent, not just due to their return abilities, but to the journey each protagonist goes through. I would have liked to include more Deltarune in this video, and I probably could have, but the story isn't complete as of now. Same for ReZero though, so I'm not 100% sure how Toby Fox will tie all these themes together in the end. Thank you for watching. I hope you appreciated this corroboration of two of my favorite pieces of fiction. ReZero and Undertale/Deltarune are very special to me, and I wanted to share these feelings with other people. This video was inspired by a multitude of other videos about ReZero and Undertale/Deltarune, and I'm grateful to these creators that have made such wonderful analyses. This has been one of my longest videos yet, so if you prefer the longer format, please tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, I recommend subscribing, and we have a ton of other videos just like it, and there will be definitely more in the future.